podcast. Man, we go way back. So I personally, I guess my goals with having a conversation with you is just kind of pick your brain a little bit.
Okay.
I feel like you have a lot of wisdom, or at least a lot of experiences. So, like, there's a lot of folks out there that are hurting and a lot of pain, right? And I think there's a lot of folks out there that they want to believe, but they don't know how. So sometimes wisdom is, as much as I would love to earn it young or younger, sometimes guys that have been around a little bit have a little bit more wisdom than us. So I guess we'll start with, what is something that you would say today? We'll start right off the bat, get right to the nitty gritty. What would you say to somebody today who is struggling with some type of addiction? And that could be pornography, drugs, alcohol. What could you say to them if they are interested in God but don't know where to begin?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I tend to give an unpopular answer, I think. Having gone to Mighty Oaks and spending a week with 13 guys that were really struggling.
What is Mighty Oaks?
Mighty Oaks is it's a intervention program for veterans who are struggling, and it's faith-based, and they don't hide the fact that they're faith-based.
Do they accept anybody?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, but you have to be a veteran.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you have to be a veteran. So, I took one of the guys down there from here to be moral support for him. So, with that said, those guys were having all kinds of issues, right? 6 out of the 13 tried to commit suicide. One of the fellas tried to commit suicide the week before we were there. And the program was all about getting fixed by getting to the root of the problem, and that is the root of the problem, not knowing Christ, not having a relationship with Christ. So, and these fellas had all kinds of issues. That everyone had a common experience, and that was the military. Most everyone combat, but the issues were beyond that. So, with that said, I think that if you don't know where to start, you have an addiction, the addiction is okay. Don't beat yourself up about it, and just start with a relationship with Christ, which typically you buy into that typically when you are at the rock bottom and there's no other options available.
That's always a tough place to be. I heard this morning something about, so God he said, I will give you a new heart. So what was it about? When you sin, right? Cut off the right hand, whatever. So it's coming from your heart. But he later says, I will give you a new heart. I'm pretty sure something like that. I might have to be more clarifying on that. But that process of him giving you a new heart is painful. And it hurts. It's just one of those things, at least in my experience, it's been like that. So I feel like maybe these guys, they're there to potentially attempt to allow Jesus to do it, because I don't think you don't do it. You know what I'm saying? We don't turn our hearts over. It's an act of God to do so. And people are resistant. I was resistant.
Yeah, so I was too. And what I found difficult, and I think a lot of people do, was giving up control. So, my testimony is, in that regard, is I didn't give up all control at once in the beginning. I gave up just a little bit, and that was enough. and then some more, and a little bit more, and eventually a lot. And maybe it's not 100%. It isn't 100% right now, but it's a significant amount. I don't know, 95% if I were to guess. But yeah, so you've got to let your old self die,
Mm-hmm.
and to be reborn. Right, it's the analogy. To be reborn, you have to let your old self die. You have to let yourself die to him to be able to receive him. You have to let that ego. You have to separate yourself from your ego. You have to separate yourself from your old self to experience him. And throughout the day and throughout the week, we go through moments where we fully give ourselves to him, but those moments don't last. We pull back to our egotistical selves, to our old selves, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as you mature in your relationship with Christ, you become you give yourself up more and more.
That's like the awareness.
That is it's the awareness. You start finding no meaning in worldly things, to include music and movies and TV commercials and shows, because the more you give yourself to him, or the more you accept him, or the more you let yourself die and receive him, the less the world has meaning.
Mm-hmm. Like this morning, I got the pleasure of speaking with another individual here. When I first saw him, something about him made me think like he had some pain, like there was something going on, just not his typical self. And so I felt inclined to just kind of ask him if he's okay, And so it led to a good conversation, though, because he didn't ask for my opinion. He didn't ask for help. He didn't ask for any of that. But I did notice that I don't know, actually, I'll start from the beginning. This morning on the way into work, I was listening to Cliff on one of his teachings, and he brought up purpose. And for whatever reason, it stuck with me, just talking about purpose, like the fact that you have value because of a creator. That's why you have value. Remove the creator, you are no longer anything but an accident, which you lose all your value. Mm-hmm. So seeing him in some form of pain, it almost introduced the opportunity to bring up purpose. And I asked him, what is purpose to you? Do you know what that is? And you know what his first answer was? It's probably a pretty common answer. He said, to work, to come in, do my job, and to go home and take care of my family, essentially, right? That's his purpose. He's fallen in that very narrow way of thinking. So it was so important at that moment. I felt like I got to strike this home, but you are not your job. You are not your family either. And I think the most important piece is that you belong to a great God. That your purpose is simply to praise God, to serve God. What that means, though, is at your job, you do your best, right? In your relationships, family, friends, you do your best. You're always putting your best foot forward because of the Creator. So your purpose goes way beyond the scope. And I think we have a huge mental health crisis in our country right now. And I would say even possibly the world. I would assume it's not just here. People are not in touch with God anymore, or at least there's a strong resistance out there. And we're all basically picking a side. And I think that those that struggle with mental health struggle for the desire to have purpose. And little do they know that their purpose is simply to, when you wake up, you thank God for waking up. You know, for me, I'm married. It's important that I greet my wife in the morning, not when it's 5 a.m., but, you know, later. It's always important to be as loving as I can for my kids. That also includes discipline, because my purpose, right? It's out of love. So everything is, your purpose is nothing physical in this world. And I think we get caught up thinking about purpose with money. Money becomes a driver. And it almost appears as if the guy who can afford a Bentley is more valuable than the guy standing on the street with a sign. But that value, they are both human beings. So, and I would actually probably, I know that the one standing on the street, he might have some issues with like drugs, alcohol. I don't know. That's pretty common in that field. However, the rich man is suffering too, and a lot of us don't know it, but he or she is suffering with their money. They just they're not aware of it. And I think that's a lot when it comes to suffering and purpose. It all comes from a place of it's ignorance. Do you know, like I feel like in my journey, my walk with God, it started off with I was interested. Like John had to be my first guest, and that was because he and another mutual friend of ours is the first one to really introduce God in a point of view that kind of directed me in the right path. But it didn't just happen overnight. It took, that was 2014, 2015 time frame. And it wasn't until 2021 that I finally submitted, or the submission began. And so we're talking years of not really knowing that personal relationship with God, nor was I really after it. I was interested, but not willing. I didn't understand what it meant to have a personal relationship with God. So John was one of the guys that kind of just, you know, you brought him, you allowed me to, what's the word? It's just, honestly, it's like saying, hey, this is Brian. Nice to meet you, Brian. I don't know anything about Brian. Am I going to give him time to get to know him? Same as Jesus. That relationship is so key, to put the effort in to get to know him first. But I think the signs are all there. People that are suffering with mental health, I think they don't know it. They don't know that he's been answering them and talking to them this whole time.
Yeah, they don't know that he's there with them and through all the struggles. And when they come to realize that, that's when the big change occurs.
You think it's a radical change all at once?
So,
like, I'm talking that moment that Christ meets you. It's like, because you have to build up.
It absolutely is. Yeah, I think it is. But when that change occurs, when that's recognized, that's step one. So there's a whole lot of learning that takes many years from there. I haven't had this experience. I hear about it from other people personally in videos and listening to other folks speak. That often or sometimes hasn't happened with me, but sometimes people will in a moment get to experience Christ in a way that's magical. They're open to all kinds of knowledge. They say when they ask a question, the answer comes instantly, and it's vast. They have a feeling of warmth or being overwhelmed, but that's an experience that only lasts for hours or days, and then that's
how
it all
it
comes
works.
back to normal for them. I've never had that experience, and that's fine, but then that's step one. There's a whole lot of more steps.
Well, it's the hot and cold thing. That's common in, I think, a lot of faiths, not just Christianity, but there's a hot and coldness to it. People are on fire as a Muslim, for example, but then depending on where they live, sometimes it's forced, and other times it's they get accustomed to the people around them, right? So we're all in hot and cold, and I think when when that commitment finally meets, like you and Christ actually meet, that fire gets lit one last time and stays lit, and then you'll have your falls, your sins and stuff like that. But that the fire doesn't go out, and almost like a fire starter, where it's just not taken off yet, and it just keeps going. And finally, just when it takes to the wood, it's done. And so this might lead us into the whole once saved, always saved mentality. I after a lot of thought on this, and I've heard so many debates, and this is one of those topics in Christianity that is very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Controversial.
Yeah, it's a controversial statement, sure, but a lot of people do not believe that once saved, always saved. I think it is absolutely possible to be a fake saved. That's where I think the key component is. It's that you can pretend and play the role. You can play the role. And this is why it's important to know that only God knows the heart. But if someone walks away from the faith, did they actually have it? I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, same here. And so I think we always have free will while we're in these bodies and future existence. I think we still have free will. But I guess the real question is, maybe there's more than one. Once you see the two options in front of you, then you clearly understand what those two options are. Why would you, if you decided to follow Christ, be saved? Why would you stop and choose the other path? I think it's possible. We have free will to do that. Why would you do it? I guess that's the other question. So when hell isn't filled with people who God has rejected, hell is filled with people who have rejected God. Right. It's their free will to be there.
Cliff said something this morning too. Obviously, I listen to a lot of Cliff. My goodness, one of the things he said this morning was him and George Janko on a podcast, right? And he said basically they were deciding what is hell, right? You can't have. He says it's internal darkness, but also like a fire. So you can't have fire and darkness. That just doesn't go together, which means it's very metaphorical. And then they ended up saying the possibility is annihilation, which is cease to exist. That is frightening. I literally, for whatever reason, just when I heard it and it rang, I had to make sure to put the radio down and I just thought about that. Is it annihilation? What does that mean? That is frightening. And I think it's frightening in a way of not having God, right? That's kind of the key, because he is the giver of life. So when you remove God, you're removing life. It equals death. But we're talking when you are done here, it's done. So it's almost like both of our faiths come true. Me and an individual who chooses not to believe. My fate is hopefully, right, going to see my Lord. And your fate is the same. That's what you believed in, which was to go to nothing. Which is kind of, for me, I know that you shouldn't come to God out of just pure fear of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to hell. It's a terrible way to, like, because you should be going to heaven out of the love you have for that creator and not fear going to hell from that creator. You know what I'm saying? There needs to be a healthy balance, sure, when you become the Christ, but I think you can't scare people to heaven. It just doesn't work. There was a period in the Catholic Church where they did that. Baptists, they went through their trials. You have a lot of, I imagine Jim Jones, was that the one who don't drink the Kool-Aid? I imagine at one point he did that. He probably made him so frightened. There are people in my life extremely, extremely important to me that have been taught that too. It's like there's a fear, and that there's a healthy fear, reverence, right? I think that's the proper translation of fear for God. It's reverence. It's about like he's lifted up high, understanding his power and what he's capable of, but it's not like he's going to damn you right now, because that's not what God wants. It says he gets no joy in the suffering of the wicked, right? Or something. He gets no joy in, oh man, that'll pop up later. But
Right.
you know what I'm saying? He doesn't get joy in that.
No. Jim Jones and the public torture of witches.
Oh my goodness.
I think that is all.
What is this? Give me a second.
All right.
Oh. No. Whatever. It'll catch back up. Give it a second. No. And even if it looks like it's okay, we're good.
All right. Yeah,
I'll edit that out.
The public torture of witches was a fear tactic. Because if you really wanted to just get rid of witches, you would just get rid of witches instead of doing it publicly, and then to torture them in public. That's unlike hanging, which is breaking the law. The witch thing was more than breaking the law. It was trying to send a message to scare people into doing righteous acts.
Well, they weren't actually killing them thinking they were witches. Right? They didn't actually think they were witches. Like, they knew. I think there's like evidence. This is more of a recent thing, I'm pretty sure. Again, I'm not super educated on this, but I'm pretty sure they came out with something that these people knew that these women were just unwell, but they convinced everybody that they were witches.
Could be.
And it was the whole point was to, send a message, essentially. I'm sure there's more to it that I'm not really expressing here, but that's a good point that you brought up.
And each individual case was probably had its own story too. There might have been some personal reasons between the executor and the witch. Who knows?
These types of things are always an attack towards Christianity. Do you notice that? They're always blown out of proportion. It doesn't take away from the fact that, yes, there was some horrible things that have happened in the past. But one of the things is like the Ben Salem witch trials. It's when I was a kid all the way up until I would say fairly recently, my mind was that they killed a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what happened.
No, I don't think so.
My whole life I thought they were just killing women in that whole region. But that's not the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's painted that way.
Yeah.
To make you, I don't know, to lead you to that, I guess.
It's more, it paints it creates a nicer story.
I guess.
But I don't, if I were to guess, I'd guess maybe a dozen.
I don't even know if it was that much.
Yeah, and that might be on the high side.
So the Crusades, everyone attacks Christianity for the Crusades. Turns out it was anticlimactic. It was not as bloody as everyone thinks it was. See, like, I don't know, that maybe that's just because if you're going to attack God, the true one, you're going to go all out. Like, it's to me, that's the work of the devil. He's going to manipulate. And if we just take a step back and look at like what has happened to Christians in general as a whole, and like the accusations that fall on them, of course, it's easier to point at them and say they're obviously wrong and corrupt when you can just make things up about them, if that makes sense. It's the same as, right. I don't know, it's so quick to say Christianity is wrong because John, not you, but John is, look, he's going to a strip club after church. So look at that faith. And it's like, wait, you're judging an entire faith off that guy. Right. This is so common. It's probably one of the biggest pieces, I guess, or this is one of the biggest discussions that come up with those that do not believe, is they're so quick to call out the hypocrisy in Christians. And they have every right to call out Christians, honestly, because Jesus did not like hypocrites. And he's very clear on that. But that's why it's important to walk and talk the way Christ did. You know, there was a podcast with George Janko and the Bible Girls. Have you ever listened to them?
No.
They come up with some good stuff sometimes. They're, at least I think so. They brought up the whole Matthew 26. Man, I could be wrong there. Better get that. I think it's 26. But basically, when Peter denies Jesus 3 times, the first accusation was, that's Peter. Hey, you're one of his followers. He said, no, I'm not. Second time, same thing. The third time, they said, you're him. You're one of the followers of Christ, or Jesus, if that's like a preacher or whatever. Because we know by the way you walk, the way you talk, you sound like him. So it says he began to curse and swear. And that's when the rooster crowed. So he began to curse and swear and say, I do not know that man. And that's when they let him alone. So it's important that we are representing Christ, because now that same Peter, and by the way, this is not my thought process on this. This is something that I've learned from that podcast. I want to make sure it's not like me coming up with this. But after that, then what does Peter do? He goes and he dies for that God that he denied, which means he ended up talking the talk to the very end. You know, so us Christians do have that responsibility. I think I've heard this. I don't know where I've heard it, but you know, you got the law. So you got oh my gosh, second commandment: Thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain. Is that second?
I'm not sure.
Man, we're great Christians. Check that out. We should definitely know the commandments in a row. Pretty sure it's the second commandment. Or that's some of this might have to get edited out. It's that's shall not have false gods. The third commandment is thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain.
Yeah, they're prioritized.
Oh goodness, I'm out here trying to start a Christian podcast and can't even get the commandments right. But anyway, it's thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain. And I think at some point we wear Christ. We wear God. When you say, I am a believer, you are wearing the glory of God. Essentially, he's covering you, right? So now you go out and you watch porn, right? Or you go to a strip club, or you're swearing like a sailor. The whole time you made the claim that you're not God, but you are that you are a believer. So you're using the name of God in vain, because it means you're not portraying that to others. And I think that puts aside regular sin. We all sin. But I'm saying you have a responsibility to be aware. And you might fail sometimes, but that commandment, I think, is often broken, and we don't acknowledge it as that. It's like, oh, I didn't lie. I didn't, I don't know, kill somebody. So I didn't commit murder. So I didn't break any of those sins. And it's like, yeah, but you're taking the Lord's name by representing him. I don't know anything you added there, but that's my thought process on it.
Yeah. The walk has purpose to beyond our ability to comprehend what that purpose is. Yeah, if you listen to Vance, whatever his first name is, the VP of Trump, talk at the RNC about his grandmother being a great person that he was raised by, a great influence of Jesus to him, but swore like a sailor. So there is something to the experience of being imperfect, that is beyond our ability to comprehend, I think. And if you watch the movie Life After Death,
It's like a documentary, right?
Right.
It's like, yeah, it has like
Right.
a documentary feel to it.
yeah, and the lady who gets trapped underneath the water dies as a result of a kayak accident.
Yeah, she was stuck upside down. Right?
Yeah, and one of the things she mentions that when she died and went to heaven, or outside the gates of heaven, she was able to see, and she had that life experience, or the experience of her life that they all share, that experience, that she was able to see the effects of her decisions 20 times out. It's very difficult to see the effects of our decisions, even the effects two events out, or three, often talked about in the military. What's the word they use that we use here? The secondary effects of a decision. Anyway, so there's a word that's used.
Is this something you learned in MLC?
No, it's something.
Because I don't remember any of this.
The second order of effects.
Sure.
Or tertiary order of effects.
Yeah.
She said she was able to see 20 effects out.
We're referring to her past as well. Is that mainly what it was?
Yeah, when she went through the life review when she died, and she was able to see the effects of 20 effects out of her decisions in her life. So we can't even predict 2, 3 is difficult. She experienced what 20 was.
I don't know if I could handle that because I feel like I've done so much bad, and
Right,
there's
and
probably so many things I don't remember.
And good as well, right? So
Yeah.
my point is this: not being perfect and making mistakes is okay, so long as you get back on the path. Drug addicts. So my cousin was a heroin addict for a good decade, plus or minus. And he finally, and I told him when he started being a drug addict, and I told his dad, my uncle, when he was struggling being a drug addict, I said, hey, you know what he needs to do? And this was 10 years before he did it. He needs to leave and experience life with nothing. And that's where he'll find the answers that he needs to get to stop being an addict. Heroin addict, so it was bad. And he didn't right away, and for many years he got clean, and then he slipped up and became an addict and was stealing from family and doing really risky things, and then he'd get clean, and then he'd slip up, and he probably fell off the wagon a half a dozen times. And then finally one day, he kept trying, and he kept trying to get better, and he never gave up. And then finally one day, through the process of falling off the wagon and getting back on it, he knew the church was the answer. So he was in all these faith-based programs. And then finally one day he went on a mission trip, I think to Singapore. And everything changed. And he stopped using and then never started using again. So my point is this: whether you're starting off in your faith or you're far along in your faith and in your walk with Christ, it's okay to mess up. Just recognize, and you will recognize that you did mess up. Because as that relationship matures, as you become wise, those mistakes, falling off the wagon, becomes fewer and fewer the time between becomes less and less.
They change too.
And they change, right? So porn is natural. Don't I don't want anyone to think that it's not. Because it's human nature.
It's so common.
It's human nature,
right?
To envy, to look at women, and as the technology changes from books or being
Talking about like sexual novels and stuff.
yeah, books or being a peeking tom. That's not the right word. But as technology changes, now it's phones, and once it was computers.
It's getting worse because now they're going to VR stuff.
Right.
So that can't be good.
And, and even dolls, and then having virtual girlfriends, goodness. The whole craziness of it all. But my point is this: don't let that stop you from thinking that you're not good enough. Because some people do. And I know there's somebody here that beats himself up about it terribly to the point where his relationship with Christ suffers.
I feel like a common reply to that, though, would be is because you're not good enough. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I feel like I would hear that by maybe, I don't know if that's an extreme sentence or extreme statement to say, I feel like I'm not good enough. Well, it's like, because you're not.
Because you're not.
You're not good enough.
So that's why you have to rely on him. So that heroin addict, an addict of any kind, needs to come to that realization is I am not good enough. I need you, Jesus. And at that moment, the door is open for change. Hopefully the door doesn't get shut in that moment, but at that moment the door is open. I am not good enough. I need you.
I think that has a lot to do with...
and it's okay to have that experience weekly.
That faith, though. Like the whole mustard seed of faith can move a mountain. Mm-hmm. That's what that is. When you're open to God, like you're truly open, not to doubt in your heart. You're just like, I have nothing else, God. So you can do this. And the minute you think that, and truly, I mean, it's like a belief. Once that belief sets in, that's his way in.
Yep.
I got you.
Yep. And that's when you have to let yourself die to him. That's when you have to give up control to him. Does it have to be all of it? No. But it has. But that's where it needs to start. So for me, and I've told you this story. For me, the big moment was when I was at my wit's end with my kids, and I couldn't figure out what to do because of their disobedience, not so much to me, but to the disobedience that they were getting themselves in trouble with the law. What do I do? Because your kids are your most important thing, so you're constantly thinking about them, constantly trying to figure out how to make them better, and they were way off the line with being safe in their acts. So when I got to the point where everything I tried failed, and I was at my wit's end to try to figure out what needed to be done, that's when I cried out to Christ and said, I'm done. Tell me what to do now, because I have no clue.
As a parent.
Dude,
that's deep, man.
So
we're in the same. We go through it. That's maybe all parents do. I'm hoping,
they
right?
Should. I hope.
Ooh.
I hope. But that's where you have that's where people have the opportunity to say, Christ, I can't, because I don't know. Tell me what to do. I submit to you, and that. There was a quite a bit of a walk before that, and there's been quite a bit after that, but that was a milestone in the walk where I really had the opportunity to give up my attempt to try to change things in the world and give it to him, You know, and then there was the other opportunity, the other milestone event when I was at mountain school and struggled terribly because of the physical demands. And
Yeah, but you were the oldest, right?
the second oldest, right?
Oh, there's a guy older than you?
Yeah,
Wow.
he's a colonel, 6 years older than me, whatever. But
Wow. Good for that guy.
but he was more fit than I was. But where I physically gave up, and you know, you get in a lot of trouble if you give up from an Army school. You can ruin your career.
Absolutely.
So I gave up, but not that I gave up and walked away from the school. I gave up and gave it to Christ. I said, "Oh, it's on you now, Jesus. I'm done. I'll continue to put my best foot forward, but I'm done stressing. If I pass this course, I pass. If I fail this course, I fail. But it's on you now."
I just thought about the silly badge that you earned.
Yeah.
Can't believe it's part of the Army school, but yeah.
But that was a big milestone for me
That's huge.
to where I was so physically beat down where I had to turn to Christ for an answer, and I was satisfied with whatever the outcome was. It was a big life lesson, something that I can lean on or think about as I'm going through life, and whether it's a physical thing I need to overcome or mental. I know with this degree, there's a whole lot of praying every week, nearly every day, where I am so mentally spent and physically spent from lack of sleep that I give it up to Christ again. Say, all right, I'll do my best, but it's on you. And that's a healthy place to be. Whether you're a homeless guy on the corner or a prostitute in a hotel, it's okay to give up and to give it to Christ to figure out. Or you're broke because you don't make a lot of money, or you do make a lot of money and you have a lot of bills, and you can't figure out how to get by from month to month without going more and more in debt, or maybe a dead-end job.
Yeah, I was a
or
gambler.
Single mom,
I was a gambler, right? So
single moms that are on their way to the abortion clinic.
oh boy.
You can give it up to Christ and say, I'm done. It's on you. Whatever happens is, I'll accept.
I mean, think about how much, what kind of weight can be lifted off somebody for that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I experienced too. Because when I came back and I was asked to talk about my experience there, because I told the leadership that it was a very spiritual experience, and they wanted me to discuss it with the battalion, with the group of guys, 50 guys or so that were. I think what allowed me to continue going forward better, physically and mentally, while I was at that school, was I took the weight of the stress, the weight of the worry off of my shoulders, and I gave it to him. And that was enough, or that aided in me to continue to go forward just by taking that weight, by giving that weight. Taking that weight off my shoulders gave me extra energy, the extra will to put another foot forward, because I wasn't carrying that weight anymore. And that can apply to the homeless guy, the addict,
It can.
the prostitute that feels that she needs to do her thing, the mean person. Take that weight off your shoulders and get rid of it. There's a verse, there's a story, Paul tells it, and I don't know if it's Corinthians. I think it is Corinthians, where he refers to the walk with Christ to a race.
Yeah, Right, the victory. Yeah.
And that is that analogy of taking the weight off to be able to win the race or continue the race.
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, yeah, and that's for real. I mean, I experienced it firsthand, and I think we all can. And not only so when you get rid of that weight of anxiety and worry, for those that are going through that are going through depression, taking that weight off then gives you the peace that only He can provide. Because you can't take that weight off. Let me back up. You can take that weight off by eating, by being a workaholic, by watching porn, by drinking, by smoking a joint, by doing heroin. You can release that weight through those physical means, by our human means. But until you release that weight through a spiritual means, through the Creator, that is where true peace comes.
Well, all the other stuff we know is temporary, but I think it's over time as well. It gets heavier.
It does.
So you get high or drink that one time, then the next day you do it again. And when you start to get so far into it, one is you probably do a little more as you go. And then I think, like all sinners, we all experience this where you end up thinking, I'm too far gone. I've been doing this for so long. This is who I am. I'm a sinner, right? And if you don't believe that of a God, whatever, you'll still come to the same conclusion that you are a sinner, that you are messed up. But I think it always comes down to, like, time is also your friend. It's not just your enemy. So, like, if you are stuck in some type of addiction for time, months go by, years, it's very unfortunate. Some people get really stuck. And they think that, back to that, I'm not good enough. So they keep him further away and continue dabbling in that sinful road because they feel like that's all they're worth. But until they realize, I still have time left. And if it's 1 minute with Christ, 1 minute, and then you die, that is enough to save you. That second you say, I'm done, God, I trust you, right? I accept you as my Lord and Savior. Well, the moment, and you believe it, well, then 70 years of drug use doesn't, if someone makes it that long, that's pretty impressive. But whatever, a lifetime of abuse, of that type of abuse on your own body, people don't like it, but it goes away. It's there. You always, but it goes away in the sense of being held against you. Now, I don't know how that works when you die. No one does, I don't think. But, like, for me, the things I've done, I imagine I got to face, even though I went through a spiritual wash from God, I definitely went through some type of cleanse process, which was that whole renewal of the heart. But I still think, I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like it's going to be, do I still have to face it when I die? Because I feel like I have to still, even though I know God's got me and I'm saved, I almost feel like I still have to answer for them, I guess.
I suppose, like nobody knows, but you hear stories of the guys that have died and come back that experienced that exact thing of having to experience their bad decisions over again, and a lot more intense than when they were going through it.
Yeah.
For reasons that I don't understand why. Maybe that reliving of life is a cleansing moment, good and bad.
Think
that's required for you to get through those pearly gates. Because all those folks that have died and come back, they never make it into heaven. They only make it to the step before.
Well, some of them are, I would say, deceiving. It's almost like it sounds like heaven in some cases.
It is, but it's not inside the.
Well, Imagine Heaven was the first book. Didn't they have cases where they saw the city?
They saw it, but never made it in it.
Okay.
Or at least that's the way I interpret the book.
Sure, me too.
Their experience, and
now that you're saying it,
and thinking that they're even not crazy too. And then the other stuff that I've experienced listening to people talk about, you can't get there until you've severed that tether between the spirit and the body. It's only until that's severed that you can actually make your way in. Until that, you can only experience it from the outside. So I don't know where I was going, but the point is that they didn't actually experience the fullness of life after
Right.
death.
But they had to experience what they've done in the past, essentially.
Right.
Man,
They did experience part of the experience of life after death, not the full thing.
I think sometimes it's deceiving as a Christian, like especially when I first came to Christianity, like when I first came to buying into Jesus truly. I was under the impression that when you show up, basically Jesus takes his arm, wraps around, and goes, "He's on me." Like, you know what I mean? I got him to his father. Like, I took his punishment. I got him. And then it's just as if you've never done anything wrong. And part of me was like, that was awesome. Huge selling point to me. I was like, that is great because I know I've got some dirt, right? I don't want that dirt being brought back up, but I think it has to. And it's almost like another process. Imagine if you died and you go to heaven and all you receive is just pure joy and love. And as great as that sounds, it's almost like, well, then this is where it's maybe controversial, but to me, it's almost like, you have to be reminded?
Yeah, no, I'm tracking what you're saying. Yeah, no, I think that reviewing your life experience might be a cleansing moment before you,
So that you purgatory, pretty much, essentially.
No, I think there's a forget. So in the verse of that one song, where death is just a memory, which is such a crazy notion that death would be a memory. That before you get to experience heaven in its fullness, you've got to forget that you had all these ailments of mind and body.
So this goes back to I've had debates over this.
And that life experience, that reliving of a life experience might be a cleansing moment where after that everything's forgotten and you can really live the way we were meant to be.
Why do I struggle with that, man? I struggle with that thought. I struggle with the idea of this. I love God. How did I come to love God? Through the pain and the sorrow through it, right? Suffering. My wrongdoings, answering for them. That's how I came to know the mercy and love of God.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a requirement.
But you remove that. Now we go to heaven, and before I enter the pearly gates, he says, hey, let's review your life. I relive every one of those painful moments, or even, like you said, the good too. But I imagine there's a lot of things that I did that I don't know about even, and it's going to come up, and I'm just going to have to relive all that. But then I go through the gates, and all of a sudden, I forget it all. And part of me wonders, like, okay, so now I'm in robot mode, right? And at that point now, I'm just loving God because I was told I have to, or that I'm automatically in love with God. And I felt like my love came from the pain.
Yeah, there still must be free will in that. Yeah, because you have the army, you have the army angels, right? Saint Michael.
But us?
No, but those folks are, those heavenly beings are having logical thoughts. They still have free will. Max, who we work with, we were talking about a biblical story where somebody was struggling with demons, and they were fighting. And I believe this is Old Testament. I'm certain of it. And I don't know the book or the verse. He was telling me somebody was struggling fighting demons, and they were fighting for a month, and eventually this angel came to him and defeated these demons that this guy was fighting. And he said, well, I don't think he asked. The angel said to the guy, I got held up. We were fighting another war, and it took me a month to get to you. So, if you've got these...
This is like a true story about it? This is a guy who
this is a biblical story, a story in the Bible, in the Old Testament.
Why am I not tracking this?
Yeah, ask him tomorrow. Ask him about it.
See, this is why you read the Bible 100 times, because there's going to be things that pop up and you didn't even know they were in there.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
And talk to others. So, if these angels are soldiering angels, there's got to be some free will involved in heaven as well. There's got to be some logic because you're making decisions.
Oh, dude, I have a friend who's like I don't even know what he is. He's not Messianic Jew. He believes in Jesus, not as God, but as the Messiah. But his belief in all that gets really in depth. However, as interesting as that is, he brings up that what happens in the spiritual, he'd be so proud of me right now if he saw this. What happens in the spiritual reflects on the physical. So what's going on in Israel, he said everyone is fighting. Angels, Gabriel, is meant to protect Israel. So he is fighting to protect Israel. That's what all these demons are coming in the spiritual realm, and it's reflected in the physical. And that's what we're seeing in real time. So I guess that applies all over, even to the small things in our own lives. There's warfare happening all around us, and it reflects here.
That's interesting.
Super interesting.
There definitely is warfare in the spiritual. Yeah.
But it's not like fighting, like, at least the way he explained it to me, and I could be wrong, right? But I'm pretty sure it's not like swords and gladiators and guns, and it's nothing like that. It is wrestling. It's a submission match. So Gabriel is wrestling with these other demons that are basically fighting. They're fighting them. So to me, that's a pretty cool explanation. At least it makes a little bit of sense when it comes to what you were just saying.
Because there's no fight to the death, because of every being is infinite.
Right.
Outside of the physical.
Unless God, which Satan is not eternal, he will die. Right? He'll cease to exist. I'm pretty sure the scripture points to that. I'm pretty sure he ceased after 1,000 years. Revelations gets a little crazy. Like, it's hard to talk about it, but I'm not well versed in it. I'll tell you that. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to just walk like God did. That's all I care to do. That's why I'm starting this podcast. Honestly, I just want to share things with God. I want to share things with God and my friends. About, what? There's people out here that need Him. That I needed Him. Luckily, we live in an age of technology, and I feel like I've been getting sharper with it. But nothing beats reading Scripture, getting to know Scripture, and knowing it. You got to know Scripture. You got to read it. That's how He communicates with us. You know what I mean? But I just had a guy earlier. I was so happy. I've been working on this guy. I really do like him. You know who he is. I'm just not going to put him out there like that. But he was an atheist for a long time, at least. And every time I brought up faith with him, he was always on the brash side. Like, he just did not care. He let me talk, and he listened, but he was always rebuttaling everything. He was, good debater, right? He liked that, but he was on the atheistic side, which is okay. I as a matter of fact, it's really crazy. Thought about him last night and woke up this morning on my drive in thinking about him, going like, I wonder what our conversation is going to be like, because I was expecting some type of resistance. I was going to bring it up. I always try, just because I do want the best thing for him. I think he's a good dude. So as a I was preparing in my mind how I was going to approach this conversation. We're in there. Brian brings it, I bring up this conversation about God on purpose. Not like, hey, do you believe in God? Not like that. Just casually brought him up, knowing this individual was listening. And Brian further kind of engaged a little bit. And that dude said, yeah, I've been coming to some type of faith. I'm no longer atheist. He said, I'm actually starting to lean more towards the religious style. Religion, however, I understand what he's saying, what he means. So, look, it's not me. It could have been somebody else, something he came across. It could have been anything,
Right.
But
Right.
I will say this, that's something I was trying to get him to do.
Right.
So I don't think it was me. But still, I just know that God works through everyone, right? So that's why it's important. You don't know who it's going to be and how God's going to use you. So I'm hoping this podcast, I got to study more. As I'm regurgitating things, I realized that, oh my gosh, like I'm not well scripted in verses. I'm listening to Johnny Chang last night. Do you ever listen to Johnny Chang? Oh gosh. The dude is just, he's a guy who's got so much baggage but he's saved. So we were talking about those that have a lot of sin, right? The addictions and stuff like that. Please listen to Johnny Chang. As a matter of fact, I would say just go to the George Janko Johnny Chang interview. Dude, I'm telling you now, it's just, you could tell that's a guy who was saved by God. You just hear it in his voice, his demeanor. That's a man who is submitted to the Lord. I'm telling you, just give it a try. You would never know by looking at him. Tatted up, gangster, like that's what he was. But he's 100% turned over a new leaf. And his story is incredible. He's the guy that you would never expect to turn to God.
Yeah, so to take that back to your first question, you got to stay curious. You got to be curious, and that is all it takes. And then that'll get the first step. And once you're years or decades or so into the walk with Christ, you'll still be curious. And then you'll wonder what heaven will be like. At first, you'll wonder if there's even the ability to have peace. Then the curiosity. Once you get some of those questions answered, the curiosity stays, and you're still wondering what's next. So the first step, the first thing, if you're struggling, is be curious, and that'll open doors.
Yeah, that's a good way to end it, honestly. Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate this. You guys don't know, this is the second go. First go was about a month ago. I listened to it. It's my first time ever using this equipment or being on any kind of podcast. Not as easy as it looks. So hats off to all the podcasters out there who are out there really trying and on all topics. Good for you. This is not easy. I hope you guys come back. Whatever. This is going to take me some time getting used to. So thanks, John. Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Paul.
See you, man.